I wrote a number of articles, smart articles over the weekend on this. Can we have boots on the ground if we end up with a tripart or three-part Iraq?
Well, in Iraq and Syria, what we're really seeing, and in the Middle East in general, is a conflict and a contest for power and territory between Sunni and Shia. That's rarely said, but I believe that's what we're seeing. Boots on the ground in that conflict right now, from an American perspective, is very tough.
Is there when you studied at Yale and at Harvard and all the 8 degrees you have, Anders, did you see any history that is like this? Other than, like, what, the Second Crusade, Brendan?
The Children's
Crusade?
Crusade?
Like 1150 or something?
There are very few occasions in which counterinsurgency really works when a foreign power comes in. Malaysia is possibly one of them, but most other counterinsurgencies are too difficult for us. We spent, there are some studies out of Brown University and Harvard University that argue that we've spent up to $6 trillion between Afghanistan and Iraq, counterinsurgencies in Afghanistan and Iraq, if you include veterans' benefits. Okay, that's a lot of money, and I don't think we have that kind of money right now to get involved with Islamic State with boots on the ground and be effective.
But this is the hardest thing to tell the national security establishment in Washington, which is we can't fix this.
Yeah, I mean, to fix it, we would have to go back to some of the military tactics from World War II, and I don't think the American people have that kind of stomach.
Well,
right now.
I look at this in the emotion of that singular photograph of the caskets on the American Airlines being unloaded, I'm guessing 4 or 5 years ago, or Vonnie Quinn. I think of the way a soldier comes back from the United Kingdom in a casket, and the BBC follows them every step of the way to the village. I mean, part of this is just the emotion of boots on the ground.
Sure, and it makes it extraordinarily real. And, of course, there are all sorts of different rules and regulations in the United States versus in Europe. But I have a question about ISIL and ISIS moving east. If ISIS was to get further east towards where the oil is in Syria, would there be a bigger case for putting more boots on the ground or boots on the ground?
I don't think so. I think you've got to compare the ISIS threat to other major threats like Russia and China. When you make those comparisons, we only have a fixed amount of defense dollars we can spend. We have a fixed number of soldiers that we can send out. We've seen that we've been, we were essentially unsuccessful in Afghanistan and Iraq in the past. We don't really have as much of a dog in this fight as we do in terms of protecting Eastern Europe from Russia and in terms of protecting our allies in Asia from China's growth.
We don't have a dog in this fight, but one of the issues in this presidential election is whether or not it's worth going back to the decisions that were made in 2002. Is it worth looking back at our decision to invade Iraq and analyzing that as a part of what's happening now in Iraq and Syria?
It's always important to look at history. If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? But I would argue that in this case, in a sense, drone attacks, F-16 pinpoint attacks on insurgents look great on TV. They're crowd pleasers for U.S. politicians.
But they don't.
But they really are not having a big effect.
Then educate us on what does matter from the past and from a reading of history, which is the great Iran-Iraq War. That was a real war involving thousands of peoples, and that to some extent sounds a little bit like maybe where we're heading within a three-part Iraq.
Right, but possibly between Iran and Saudi Arabia at this point. Iran and Iraq war was still a Sunni-Shia war, but now Iraq has evaporated, Syria has evaporated into chaos, and so now the two major poles are Saudi Arabia and Iran. Okay,
Anders Corr with a briefing here on the difficult and overused phrase, boots on the ground. The stuff I read over the weekend was just they just assume a three-part Iraq, Brendan.
Yeah.